This is an ABC News special report.
Major news in the Russian investigation.
Robert Mueller has charged
Lieutenant General Michael T. Flynn.
And the president himself learned of this when they read it in the news.
The cloud of suspicion hovering over the White House grew darker today.
Make no mistake, Mueller approved this deal to get something.
Flynn's extremely angry at the White House tonight.
It was shortly after 10 a.m. Former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn pleads guilty to lying to the FBI about his contacts with a high-level Russian official. Flynn telling associates he's prepared to testify against President Trump and his closest advisors for Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation.
The next president of the United States, right here.
According to a Flynn confidant, he's willing to say it was Trump himself, as president-elect, who directed him to reach out to Russian leaders about fighting ISIS. Reaction to the stunning development was swift.
Clearly, he was willing to lie about those contacts and lied to the FBI, and I'm anxious to hear from him a fuller explanation of who all directed him to have these contacts.
This is so significant. You're talking about someone's national security advisor, someone with a military background who pled guilty to lying to the FBI, to the federal government.
And I know everyone's cheering in here again. I give Democrats and liberals this moment.
Flynn is yet another Team Trump member found to have undisclosed interactions with Russian officials, along with Attorney General Jeff Sessions, Jared Kushner, Carter Page, George Papadopoulos, Paul Manafort, and Donald Trump Jr.
Bob Mueller, the special counsel, is a diligent, methodical investigator, and this is simply another step along the way to uncover what happened here. And then today's news is just a dramatic step.
Melinda Haig is a former federal prosecutor who worked for Robert Mueller.
The investigation has now reached a member of the inner circle of President Trump, somebody who served as a close advisor to the president. We are now one step away from the president, really.
This was the only glimpse of President Trump today.
President, any comment on Michael Flynn being indicted, sir?
A few minutes later, the White House abruptly cancels a planned photo op with the Libyan prime minister. The president's lawyer released a statement that seemed to distance the White House from Flynn, saying in part, nothing about the guilty plea or the charge implicates anyone other than Mr. Flynn.
I think on its face, it has a lot to do with people other than General Flynn.
One of those people, the president's son-in-law. Documents released today say a very senior official in the transition team told Flynn to contact the Russian ambassador about a UN resolution involving Israel. We are now told that person was Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump's husband. Flynn now admitting that he lied about his discussions of that UN resolution. Flynn also admits to lying to the FBI about a phone call with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak on December 29th last year. The same day President Obama announced sanctions against Russia for interfering in the U.S. presidential campaign in 2016. Something the U.S. intelligence community confirmed, stating Russia's actions favored Donald Trump. Flynn falsely told the FBI and Vice President Mike Pence that he didn't talk about the sanctions with Kislyak. But in February, intelligence leaks, reportedly from wiretaps of Kislyak's phone calls, showed that Flynn had asked that Russians not escalate the situation.
Very surprising to think that General Flynn would not understand and believe that any conversation he had with Ambassador Kislyak would not be picked up by a wiretap.
Flynn was forced to resign less than a month into his NSA post. At the time, Trump insisted Flynn's sin wasn't that he reached out to the Russians, but that he lied to Vice President Pence.
He was just doing his job. The thing is, he didn't tell our vice president properly, and then he said he didn't remember. So either way, it wasn't very satisfactory to me.
The day after Flynn resigned, President Trump met privately with then FBI Director James Comey, who told Congress Trump made a request.
I understood him to be saying that what he wanted me to do was drop any investigation connected to Flynn's account of his conversations with the Russians.
Trump ultimately fired Comey in May.
I think it's hard to believe that the special counsel is not investigating whether the firing of the FBI director, Jim Comey, was intended to shut down the investigation of General Flynn.
Firing Comey is what prompted the appointment of special counsel Mueller. Today, Comey tweeted, "But justice rolled down like waters and righteousness, like an ever-flowing stream." The scales of justice now centering around Michael Flynn, who faces up to 5 years in prison. It's a stunning fall from grace for the retired three-star general.
Mike Flynn spent more than 30 years in the Army. He was well respected as an officer. He was considered a very brilliant intelligence officer. But there was a point after he became head of Defense Intelligence Agency where his leadership went awry.
At the Republican National Convention, he famously called for Hillary Clinton to go to prison.
Lock her up. That's right. That's right. Lock her up.
He didn't go out there, I don't think, planning on saying lock her up. But when he heard the crowd, I mean, you could just see him when you were there in the convention. He was just feeding off that crowd. But when you get that sort of power and attention mixed with that bitterness, I think that's probably what really changed Mike Flynn.
In a statement released today, Flynn said in part, "It has been extraordinarily painful to endure these many months of false accusations of treason and other outrageous acts. Such false accusations are contrary to everything I have ever done and stood for. My guilty plea and agreement to cooperate with the special counsel's office reflect the decision I made in the best interests of my family and of our country. I accept full responsibility for my actions." It was just after the election that President Obama had expressed his profound concerns to Trump about Flynn's trustworthiness. And Sally Yates, the then acting head of the Department of Justice, alerted the White House counsel that Flynn had lied to the vice president about his contacts with Russians and was vulnerable to blackmail.
We were concerned that the American people had been misled about the underlying conduct and what General Flynn had done.
4 days later, Trump fired Yates, citing her refusal to support his travel ban.
Refugees are welcome here. I would be surprised if the special counsel is not now looking into the firing of Sally Yates and trying to determine whether the president fired Sally Yates for reasons connected to General Flynn and not for reasons connected to the travel ban.
Despite the president's insistence,
Russia is fake news. This is fake news put out by the media.
Evidence continues to grow that appears to point to the contrary. Adding to the confusion, Trump has also failed to enforce the sanctions against Russia, overwhelmingly approved by Congress as punishment for the country's 2016 meddling.
It looks like the Russians, whatever you think of all of these stories, get exactly what they want. They get to meddle in the election, undermine faith in American democracy, and they start to get the policy outcomes in terms of a president who's a lot less tough on them than they might otherwise have.
All of this having so many asking, why does the President of the United States have such a fondness for a country that's openly hostile to America?
This story is a head-scratcher for very staunch allies of the White House. They cannot figure out why President Trump seems to have a soft spot for Russia.
The president could pardon Flynn, but not without severe consequences.
This investigation goes all the way to, reportedly, the president's son-in-law, and according to some, it goes all the way to the president. It seems to me that under these circumstances, if the president pardoned General Flynn, that it would be political suicide.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.